Rain slapped the concrete like an angry drum. Daniel Reyes stood hunched beneath the cracked overpass, arms wrapped around his sleeping daughter, Leela. She was 7, light as a whisper, curled into his chest beneath their only blanket, a faded wool square, stitched by his mother years ago. The kind that held scent memories and love in its threads. The wind howled down Fifth and Marlowe, carrying the stink of diesel and wet garbage. Daniel's lips were cracked, his knuckles raw. But he held her close, whispering old bedtime rhymes into her ear, half to soothe her, half to silence the fear rising in his chest. A sound broke through the night. Not the rain, not the wind. Sobbing. He turned. Under the blinking yellow glow of the streetlight, a woman, soaked to the skin, barefoot and shivering, leaned against a trash bin. Her makeup had run, or maybe those were just tears. Daniel blinked, looked down at Lila, then at the blanket. He stood slowly, unwrapped the only warmth they had, crossed the street. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you'll die out here like that." He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. She looked at him, eyes wide, not just with cold, but disbelief. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I know," he said, nodding once. "That's why I did." He turned, walked back, and sat on the wet curb. Shirt soaked, arms bare, heart shaking. By morning, she was gone. Blanket too, but in its place was a note tucked under his daughter's head. "You don't know who I am, but I know exactly who you are." Daniel stared at it, the storm echoing in his chest. Who the hell was she? Before the overpass, before the blanket, before the note. Daniel Reyes wore a hard hat and steel-toed boots. Back then, he was the guy who showed up first and left last. A foreman with dirt under his nails and pride in his chest. Not much for words, but if your wall was crooked, he'd level it. If your hands were shaking on a ladder, he'd climb up next to you. His co-workers called him the quiet anchor. He lived for simple things. Sunrise coffee with his wife Aina, bedtime stories with baby Layla, and the feel of wood grain beneath his fingers. Home was a 2-bedroom rental in East Haven, cheap but cozy. Daniel worked 6 days a week to afford it. On Sundays, he made pancakes too thick and burned the edges. Lila called them daddy cookies. He didn't care about titles or vacations. He only ever wanted to build a world where his daughter didn't have to flinch when bills came through the door. But life, like construction, has stress fractures. And Daniel was too proud to notice the cracks forming beneath his own foundation. When the factory started cutting corners and injuries mounted, Daniel spoke up. He thought honesty was a badge. Instead, it became a target, a snapped pulley, a fall from scaffolding, a slipped disc in his back that never healed right. The company sent flowers and a severance check that didn't even cover the e-bill. Daniel sat on the porch that night, painkillers numbing the ache in his spine, and something colder settling in his chest. He didn't know it then. But that fall didn't just break his back. It started the collapse of everything. Pain has a way of whispering before it roars. At first, Daniel told himself it was temporary. A few weeks of rest, and he'd be back on a ladder, back in charge, back to building again. But weeks became months. The injury lingered, his grip weakened. Some days he couldn't bend to tie his own boots. He tried odd jobs, fixing the fence here, patching drywall there. But the gigs dried up fast once folks saw him wince when he lifted a toolbox. The bills didn't wait. Late notices piled on the kitchen table. Lila's asthma medication got delayed. One night, the power went out mid-dinner. He and Aina sat in, the dark candlelight flickering against her tired face. She was slipping away, word by word. Aina started working double shifts at a diner, came home silent, smelled like grease and exhaustion. Daniel offered to help more, cook, clean, do school drop-offs. But every time he stood too fast or tried to lift something, pain carved lightning down his spine. One night, he heard her crying in the bathroom. muffling sobs into a towel. "Why don't you talk to me anymore?" he asked softly through the door. "Because talking won't change anything," she replied. They stopped kissing goodbye. Stopped laughing at Leela's jokes. Stopped being them. In one quiet dinner, with a microwave humming and Lila humming beside her mashed potatoes, Daniel looked across the table and realized something heartbreaking. He was no longer a provider. In his own home, he had started to feel like a burden. The coffee pot was still warm when he found the note. Daniel stepped into the kitchen at 6:12 a.m., the sun barely brushing the blinds. Lila was still asleep, wrapped in her cartoon blanket. On the pull-out couch, her bedroom already rented out to cover rent, Aina was gone. No keys. No bags, just a folded scrap of paper next to the chipped sugar jar. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me." There was no signature. Just the echo of her absence in every corner of the room. Daniel stood there, motionless, as the refrigerator hummed behind him. As if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. As if the woman he built a life with hadn't evaporated like steam off a sidewalk. He checked the closet, empty hangers. The bathroom, her toothbrush gone. Just his and Leela's lives. Left behind. He sank into the chair and stared at the wall. She didn't even wake. Lila to say goodbye. When his daughter finally stirred, rubbing her eyes and asking, "Where's Mama?" Daniel choked back the truth. "She had to go somewhere, baby. But I'm here, I got you." She blinked, confused, then curled into his lap. Daniel held her like a dam holding back a flood. He wouldn't cry. Not in front of her. Not today. That night, he made Lila grilled cheese with the last 2 slices of bread and told her a bedtime story without shaking. When she fell asleep, he sat in the kitchen alone, staring at that note. "I can't do this anymore," he whispered. To the silence, "Neither can I." But somehow he kept going. There's no manual for fatherhood after heartbreak. Daniel had built houses, decks, even a full gazebo once. But nothing prepared him for detangling a little girl's curls at 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. The first time he tried to braid Lila's hair, she winced. "Ow, you're pulling." Sorry, he muttered, his thick fingers fumbling with pink bands and a dollar store brush. "I built a whole porch last year, kiddo. You'd think I could figure out a ponytail." She giggled through the pain. Over time he learned to part straight lines, to hum softly as he brushed, to pack tiny snacks in a brown paper bag and draw. Hearts on her napkins, mornings became rituals, burned toast. Lila's favorite blue hoodie. That walk to school where she skipped ahead and waved at dogs. But behind the smile was survival. Daniel was selling tools just to keep her in school shoes. He patched up his boots with duct tape. He skipped meals so she wouldn't have to. He studied job boards late into the night, rubbing his back and trying not to curse in front of her when the pain surged. But she never saw that side. Never heard him weep into his pillow. To her, he was the strongest man in the world. One night, she wrapped her arms around him after bedtime and whispered, "Mama used to braid my hair, but now I like it when you do it better." Daniel froze, then smiled. "Yeah?" he said softly. "Well, I've been practicing." That night, as she drifted off, he stared at the ceiling. Love wasn't loud anymore. It was in every lunchbox note, every uneven braid, and every day he chose to stay. The knock came early, sharp, unforgiving. Daniel opened the door to a woman in a gray coat, clipboard in hand. The morning light cut through the narrow hallway, but her eyes were cold. "Mr. Reyes, I'm afraid this is an eviction notice," she said, voice clipped. "Rent hasn't been paid for 2 months. You have 30 days to vacate." Daniel's throat tightened. Lila tugged at his pant leg, eyes wide. We just need more time," Daniel pleaded. "I have work coming." The woman shook her head. "This is standard procedure. I'm sorry." He closed the door softly, hands trembling. On the kitchen table lay a pink envelope rent overdue. Final warning. That night, Daniel packed what little they owned, a small suitcase, Leela's favorite stuffed bear, and the faded blanket. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the cracks in the ceiling, the place where Leela's laughter used to echo. This was home no more. They slept in Daniel's old truck, rain pattering on the roof, muffling the city's distant hum. Lila shivered in the back seat. Daniel wrapped the last blanket tight around her shoulders, holding her close. His own coat was threadbare, his boots caked with mud. He thought of his mother's hands, rough and warm. Of the promises he made when Lila was born. This wasn't how the story was supposed to end. But somewhere in the dark, Daniel whispered a vow, "We'll make it through." Somehow. Daniel shuffled up to the shelter's heavy iron gate just after sunset, Leela clutching his hand like a lifeline. Inside, voices echoed laughter, murmurs of hope, the scent of warm food. The guard at the gate barely glanced at them. "Sorry, sir. Single fathers aren't accepted. Women and kids only." Daniel's chest tightened. "But my daughter, policy." The gate clicked shut like a verdict. Leela's small hand slipped from his grasp. She looked up, eyes wide and scared. Daniel knelt down. "We'll find somewhere, baby." He swallowed the lump rising in his throat and turned away, the cold night biting deeper than the wind. That night, in the truck, Leila whispered, "Why don't they want us?" Daniel held her close, heart breaking, knowing the system had already written them off. Days blurred into a relentless grind. Daniel stood outside corner stores, gas stations, fast food joints, hope thinning like the solace of his boots. "Looking for work?" a manager asked once, eyes flicking over his worn clothes and stiff back. "We'd love to help, but we need someone who can lift and stand long hours." Each rejection felt like a punch, knocking the breath out of him. He hid his frustration behind polite nods. One evening, he returned to the truck, shoulders slumped. Lila greeted him with a crooked smile. "Did you find a job today, Daddy?" He forced a grin, almost. But the truth lingered. Injuries don't heal overnight. Bills don't pause. Pride doesn't pay rent. And every night when Lila slept, Daniel stared at the ceiling, wondering how much more he could bear. One afternoon, a familiar voice startled Daniel outside a convenience store. "Hey, Reyes, didn't expect to see you here." Luis, a co-worker from better days, leaned against the wall, smirking. Luis had always been loud, brash, and the kind of guy who loved reminding Daniel of past mistakes. Daniel tensed. "Luis." Luis grinned, revealing a crooked tooth. "I heard you're down on your luck. Look, I got a gig in landscaping. It's tough, but it pays. Interested?" Daniel hesitated. The offer felt like a lifeline wrapped in humiliation. "Why help me now?" Luis shrugged. "Let's call it business." Pride fought desperation, but Lila needed shoes. Daniel nodded slowly. "All right." Luis clapped him on the back, but Daniel felt the weight of the past pressing down. Harder than his injury. The soup kitchen was loud, warm, a sanctuary on paper. But that night, it was anything but. Daniel and Layla stood in line, clutching their bowls, eyes hungry but hopeful. A volunteer near the front whispered loudly, "Men. Like you don't belong here. Women and children first." The words cut sharper than the winter wind outside. Daniel's fists clenched. He looked at Leela, cheeks flushed, eyes wide with confusion. He swallowed hard and lowered his voice. "We're here because we have nowhere else." Behind him, a murmur grew. Some sympathetic glances, some judgmental stares. Lila tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, why do they say that?" He knelt down, voice trembling. Sometimes people forget what kindness really means. That night, as they ate cold bread and watery soup, Daniel's resolve hardened. He wouldn't let the world teach Layla to feel less than worthy. That night, with the city's neon lights flickering like ghosts outside the truck window, Daniel held Lila close, watching her sleep. The faded wool blanket, worn soft by years of use, was all they had left for warmth. But then, the shivering woman appeared in the rain, and everything changed. His fingers trembled as he slowly peeled the blanket off Lila's small frame and wrapped it around the stranger's trembling shoulders. "Take it," Daniel whispered. Layla stirred, whispering, "Daddy, why?" "I promise you, sweetheart. Some people need warmth just as much as we do." The woman's eyes locked with Daniel's, a silent thank you that felt heavier than words. When dawn came, the stranger was gone, but so was the blanket, their last comfort against the cold. Daniel looked at Lila, voice soft but steady. Sometimes love means giving even when it hurts. He didn't know then that this small act of kindness would ripple far beyond the rain-soaked streets. 2 days later, as Daniel pushed the grocery cart with Lila at the edge of the market, a sleek black car rolled up beside them. A sharply dressed man stepped out, holding a silver card embossed with elegant script. "Mr. Reyes?" the man asked, voice smooth as silk. Daniel nodded, wary. "You're invited to an exclusive dinner. An opportunity awaits." Daniel blinked, confusion mixing with suspicion. What kind of opportunity? "No details here," the man smiled. "But someone who recognizes kindness deserves a chance." Lila tugged Daniel's sleeve. Maybe it's a sign, Daniel thought. The invitation felt like a dream stitched into reality, a chance to escape the cold and the pain, but also a test. He folded the card slowly, fingers tracing the embossed lettering. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of hope stirred, fragile but fierce. The black car glided up the winding road to an opulent mansion perched above the city like a beacon of another world. Daniel gripped Lila's hand tighter as they stepped out. The front doors swung open, revealing crystal chandeliers and marble floors that gleamed like frozen lakes. Standing at the entrance was the stranger, no longer soaked or trembling, but radiant in an elegant evening gown. Her eyes held secrets, power, and something softer beneath the surface. "Welcome, Daniel." "Lila," she said, voice warm but firm. He blinked. "You're her," she smiled. "Eva Delacroix." For a moment, Daniel felt like an intruder in a fairy tale. Lila's eyes widened at the glittering staircase. Eva knelt, meeting Daniel's gaze. "You gave me more than a blanket that night. You gave me hope." Daniel swallowed, trying to process the impossible. This woman, once a stranger in the rain, was now standing before him as if from a different universe. But beneath the grandeur, Daniel saw the same loneliness, the same scars, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to rewrite the story. Eva poured 2 glasses of water, settling into a plush velvet chair. "I wasn't always this," she said softly, gesturing around the mansion. Daniel listened as she unfolded her past, a story of riches inherited but lost to the cold grip of misfortune. She had fallen from grace, found herself on the streets, and survived nights colder than any Daniel had known. "The night you gave me that blanket," Eva confessed, "I was broken, invisible, but your kindness reminded me who I was before all the pain." Daniel's heart thudded. A billionaire who knew hunger, a stranger who shared his fight. Eva's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I created this kindness experiment to find people like you, those who give even when they have nothing left." He wanted to ask why. Why her? Why him? But the room felt heavy with unspoken truths. For the first time in months, Daniel felt seen. Not as a failure, not as a burden, but as a man with a story worth telling. Eva extended a hand. "Let's change lives together." The weight of Eva's offer pressed down on Daniel like the heavy night air. A home, money, a way out, but pride. That stubborn ember inside him burned hotter. "I don't want charity," Daniel said, voice low but steady. "I want dignity. I want to earn it." Eva's gaze softened. This isn't charity, it's a chance to rebuild. To help others who've fallen through the cracks. Daniel looked down at Leela, sleeping soundly in the corner of the grand room. Clutching a small stuffed bear, he thought about the nights spent in his truck, the cold biting at his skin, the hunger gnawing in his belly. He thought about the broken promises to himself and Delilah. Finally, he nodded but acceptance came at a price. He had to leave behind the small, battered world he knew, the dirt, the grime, the hard-earned scars. He had to let go of the man who carried the weight of every failure and every missed chance. That night, Daniel packed a single bag, not of clothes, but of memories. A faded photograph of his mother, Lila's first drawing, the threadbare blanket that had once warmed the stranger in the rain. As he stepped into the sleek black car waiting outside, Daniel swallowed the lump rising in his throat. Sometimes sacrifice isn't just about giving up things. Sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to hope. And in that moment, Daniel Reyes chose hope that the grandeur of the mansion couldn't shield Daniel from the storm brewing inside him. Behind polished walls and glittering chandeliers, his heart was unraveling. Late that night, after the guests had gone and Lila slept quietly in the guest room, Daniel stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the city lights that seemed too bright, too distant. The weight of everything, the pain, the loss, the years of struggle, crashed over him like a tidal wave. His breath hitched. He sank to the floor, the cold marble seeping into his bones. For the first time in months, the dam broke. Silent tears traced the lines of his weathered face. The father who fought to be strong, who braided his daughter's hair with calloused hands, who gave away their last blanket to a stranger. He let himself fall apart. The shame of failure, the agony of loneliness, the crushing fear of never being enough. It all spilled out in ragged sobs. In the darkness, Daniel whispered to himself, "I'm not broken, but I'm tired." A single knock at the door startled him. Ava's soft voice, "You don't have to carry this alone." He wiped his tears roughly. She stepped inside, offering no pity, only quiet understanding. In that moment, Daniel realized healing wasn't about pretending to be invincible. It was about letting someone in, and maybe, just maybe, letting himself breathe again. He never wanted recognition, never asked for applause. All Daniel Reyes ever gave was a blanket, but maybe that's all it takes. One quiet moment, one impossible choice. Because in a world obsessed with winners, some people still choose to lose, so others can survive. And maybe that's the real wealth no one talks about, not dollars or titles, but the courage to see someone cold and give them warmth anyway.